nice.
Recording in progress.
It's very nice to see such a crowd here tonight. My name is Rebecca Moore. I'm the chair of the Master Parks Planning Committee. And I thought it would be helpful for everybody here at the table to introduce themselves so you know who it is that you'll be listening to tonight. This is our usual committee meeting, but it's an important one because tonight we are going to hear from our consultants from Simone Collins, their revised plans based on all of the input that they've heard through the surveys, through interviewing, through our direction that we've given them. I want everybody, if you have your calendars free, to open up and mark October 9th at 7 p.m. That's where Simone Collins will be showing the, I don't want to say the final, but the last iteration of everything that they've listened to and heard. And that is a public meeting where we want to hear from as many people from the public as we can about what the plans are, the direction that we appear to be going in, so we can take that final input and use it before it's presented to the Planning Commission and finally to the Borough Council for their review. So I'm going to ask that you listen carefully to everything that's being said tonight. There will be times where we may look towards you and ask if anyone has any comments that they want to make. But for the most part, this is a committee meeting where we have to make some pretty important decisions so that Simone Collins can go back and do their work and that we can move this plan forward. So I thought maybe it would be helpful to start by just going around and introducing ourselves.
Hi, I'm Alan Gazzardo, I'm the assistant manager.
I'm Jeff Eldon. I work for the borough.
Rebecca Moore.
Michael Galdini. I'm vice chair of the committee.
Ben DeMayo.
Virginia Hess, I'm on the Shade Tree Commission.
Jean Borak, I'm on Borough Council.
Gary Cotter. Dennis Cowan.
Good evening, my name is Anita Nardone and I'm with Simone Collins Landscape Architecture.
My name is Michelle Armour and I'm also with Simone Collins Landscape Architecture.
Sarah Leeper with Simone Collins, and then we also have Bill Collins with us.
So the agenda tonight is first that Simone Collins will review all of the public participation, the process that we've gone through to capture community input. Then we're going to go through some questions that we've already posed to them and look at some of the design changes or reflections that we've made to them. Then we finally get to see some refined concepts that they've looked at after taking all that input in. And then we'll talk about the public meeting on October 9th. Two of the main discussion points or two of the main decision points for the committee tonight will be the skate park in or out, and the daylighting of the water in the Narberth Park. I'm losing so I'm going to turn.
Yeah, and if I just want to just preface this for everyone who's coming in. Since this is a committee meeting, there's a lot of information we've already gone over with the committee. So some of this, when we present everything to the public moving forward, there'll be a lot more information about all the prior public input and details on the key person interviews. But for time management tonight, that's information that the committee's already reviewed and kind of, gone in depth on. So there will be certain pieces of information that we're not presenting tonight, but that will be presented at the public meeting.
And it's also posted, it will be posted on our website as well.
That's right.
So many things that get in the way. Hold on.
Technology.
So good evening and welcome, we're going to get started. Committee meeting 3. I'm gonna actually go back to that first picture because this is what we've used in all of our slides to kick off our meetings with 3 pictures of the parks that are in this study, right? Narberth Park, Elm Grove Park, and Station Square. Beautiful places to be. And here we are, we start to look at our scheduled study meeting number 3. We're getting down toward the end. As Rebecca so beautifully said, we put in a lot of work, a lot of great conversations that we've had, a lot of in-depth looks, and we're starting to refine. So to add to what Rebecca said, what Simone Collins is going to show you for Refined Concepts Committee is our recommendation. So there still could be questions. Hopefully, as I take you through these slides, you'll see how we got there. But I will give you the answers and some brief updates. I think when Sarah takes you through the refinements, there'll be some more answers that you'll have to your questions. But let's go through that whole thing. Let's look at those refined concepts together. And as the questions flow, specifically if they are about the skate park or the daylighting, happy to come right back to it. So here we are, September 11th. A great day for Blue Patriots to remember, but looking forward to October 9th, our next big meeting. It's great. Our agenda, as Rebecca said, give a brief overview of the completed, it's not actually completed, we still have public meetings, but our key person interviews have been completed, our 3 stakeholder meetings have been completed. We'll go through what was posed back to Simone Collins after the committee's August 14th meeting. They had some very specific direction and they had some questions. So hopefully we can answer those questions. We're going to move through and show you those refined concepts and then get the committee's direction on proceeding. Generally, as the committee knows, what we present to the public is what we've shown to the committee. And that's what generally follows. So it is generally our intent and our feeling that our refined concepts are what we want to show to the public on October 9th, unless, of course, we make a decision here tonight. So that's why it is important to reiterate what Rebecca said. All right, public participation process. 12, it was slated originally to have 12 key person interviews. We actually completed about 14. And that was because we really wanted to get people who we knew we needed to speak to, and sometimes it didn't always work as planned, or we needed an additional meeting. But the first meeting, just to reiterate, was all of the environmental and ecological groups that represent this great community. They came together along with Lower Merion Conservancy, and we talked about those things that were important to that group. The Friends of Narberth History, the Narberth Business Association, the co-op gardens and the library, the Civic Association, the Cycling Club, the New Horizons Senior Center. We never were able to get in touch with the Philadelphia Independence Network, so unfortunately that didn't occur. We actually did even drop stuff off in their mailbox, so that was unfortunate. We couldn't incorporate them into the conversation. 2 meetings to cover our emergency services. We talked to the ambulance and the police and the fire, which was great. We spoke to your borough engineer and Jeff in detail about plans. The skate park users was a very interesting meeting. Montgomery County Planning Commission, I'm just reminding the group here and the committee, they are supposed to be coming out with their final recommendations for the active transportation plan. And Jean might be able to fill us in. But we keep nudging them, Jean, just like, remember we talked and we're supposed to communicate, so I've been sending that to Marley Weiss. Then we had Delco Baseball and the American Legion Baseball. We spoke to them twice. They were just kind of clarifying a little bit about their use and their wish lists. And then, of course, the borough staff. So that is all completed. All of those meetings had notes that were given to the committee and summarized so they could kind of decide and talk about things last August. Likewise, the stakeholder meetings are all complete. The annual park users, August 27th, parents of young families, the 29th, and the Station Square. Station Square, as you might know, was a focus of squaring the circle 2 years ago. So we're building on the plan that came out of that, and we'll continue to do so. The parents of young families was a great mix from the elementary schools and St. Margaret's. We had about 8 moms and some kids who were on that call. And that was just a great exchange of information. Even on the week before school started, they spent about 2.5 hours with us, which is a huge amount of time. I really appreciated that. The annual park users was just great because out of it, thanks to Melissa O'Connor, I got a full understanding, a full schedule of all the NAA activities and the scheduling of the field, all of the participating members, when they use it, how many groups under NAA use it, and that was fabulous information to get, all in one place. All right, the visioning survey update. I think a round of applause for all of you. 649, and that was really, I think, at 10 a.m. It might even be kind of world record, I think, compared to population. So fabulous, fabulous work. A's on all of your homework assignments for that. What I did was just take one question. What we had said to the committee, and you might remember, was that we kind of felt that when you looked at the first 200 responses, that we didn't think we'd see a ton of differences by the time we reached 649. And that is exactly what I saw as I reviewed all that data this week. Certainly, when there were free-form questions, thanks to Michael, we have a great, summary of all of those comments. But this one, I think, sort of is a great representation. Question 15 was your favorite type of park features. So as of today, these numbers only changed by maybe 1% or even less than that from what the first couple weeks of the survey showed us. So you kind of see natural habitats and ecological features and passive recreation, walking, observing, participating. Not much different, but certainly the highest, but not much different than active outdoor activities, community events, and playgrounds, all in about the same, And again, we always reiterate for the committee and for the people that are here, this isn't a vote, right? If it was a vote, we'd take all of this and we'd give you what you want. But this is a snapshot. This sees where people's feelings are, and taken with all of the other conversations that we have, and our job as technical designers to technically give the borough a plan that meets modern design standards for recreational activities. All of that comes into it. But this has been a great gauge of where people feel about the parks. I took one more chance to kind of give an idea. Question 20 asked specifically about Narberth Park and what the improvements were that people would like to see at Narberth Park. This was an open response. So what I did was go through, similar to what Michael did, and to try to group the responses under, and I chose 4 different areas. The first one was basically upgrading existing equipment, renovating fields and playground, improving the restrooms. Generally, comments related to all of that represented about 40% of the responses. The next 2, I lumped together accessibility, sidewalks, bikeability, bike access, green elements, trees, plantings, shades. I put them all together, represented about 20%. The next 20 were strictly those people who talked about skate park or tennis and pickleball, right? And that represented a total of about 20. I put a little star there, though, because it was after our key person interview with the skate park that we definitely saw an uptick, for sure, of the interest and the support for the skate park, right? The last group was things that talked about age-appropriate or age being a consideration in the offerings we have at Narberth Park. Things that all ages can do, especially people on the older end of the spectrum, and teens, right? Those were kind of lumped together, representing about 9%. Again, not that that's a vote. We shouldn't do that. Because we as designers are going to do that because that is truly what we do as professionals, is to make sure things are all accessible for all abilities and all age groups. But that gives you a snapshot at least of the public participation. All right, up to the second part of the agenda, which is going to specifically be to the committee. These are the things that the committee asked us on August the 14th, and we'd like to take the time to do that. So notes and questions were part of that email that Rebecca had sent out to us. And the first thing was the committee's assessment, your assessment at the time of all of those key person interview notes and all of the information from the survey. And there was 4 from the committee, just reminding you here. Green spaces, that everything in the parks plan should be cognizant of these things. Green spaces, nature, trees, and walking trails. Second, better maintained and accessible amenities. 3, space for community engagement. And 4, the strong support for the current activities that occur at Narberth Park. And there are a lot. Wasn't that fun just walking past that park this evening? Oh my gosh. It was just like you could generate electricity from Narberth Park tonight. Any comments from the committee that kind of go back to this? Committee that kind of does still represent it? All right, let's go into now the questions. The first were under the skate park questions. Size, uses, what we have here. On board there we have just to give the audience and to remind the committee what the difference is between a poured-in-place concrete skate park and a prefabricated skate park. And we'll get into that. So the first part of the question, what is an appropriate size and for what users? What age groups? Can we design for all ages, all age groups and users? Skate parks, and Sarah will expand a little bit more on this, certainly aren't for ages, right? They're for abilities, right? So we're talking about lower ability and more challenging apparatus for those with greater abilities there. And we all know that they exist together in the same places, or can, or should. And certainly that's a very good question. What is the appropriate size? Right now, the skate park occupies the 3 tennis courts, which if you took the outside of the asphalt is 18,000 square feet, right? Meeting with our skate park key person interview, we had a great discussion about really what kinds of elements makes a destination for a skate park. You know, can we use the 18,000? Could it be smaller? Could it be bigger? And they certainly informed us on different examples, and I think they shared with you all different sizes that certainly could be a fantastic skate park from 14,000 square feet up through 18,000 square feet. But the key question is not quite so much ages, but ability levels, right, for skate parks. Precast versus concrete. So if you can look at the pictures, the considerations between the two of them are important. Because when you look at a poured-in-place concrete skate park, you have a very important structural element to the design of a skate park, right? Those are large amounts of concrete that have to be supported and designed, and it is going to exist in an area that is a floodplain, as well as an area that has a very shallow groundwater table. That adds a level of complexity to the design of a poured-in-place skate park. The prefabricated can exist on much less of a structurally designed, base, right? It can be a concrete base that is more like a slab, right? Because the equipment is prefabricated and attached to that slab. One of the key things too, as you can see between the two pictures, is there is some flexibility, of course, with an area that you would pave as a slab for a future use, potentially, versus what you would pour in place and design with those wonderful elements that make skate parks so much fun, right? So that's a very important part. The design of a skate park, the engineering and the construction, certainly more expensive than the prefabricated. The last part we'd like to talk about for the skate park is the context, right? Can it fit and they're gonna see this, and we can talk about this more. Is it a priority? Is it something that we want, and where would we want it in the skate park, based on the other issues and the other challenges of space that we have there? So we put in context the skate park for Narberth. We certainly know how loved it is by the people that use it. And certainly we even, like when the parents got together, they really, even though most of them that night had younger children, they really saw the value and loved that a skate park could be close to, the playground, because there's so much interaction of that sort of thing. So, but that's a question for the committee, right? So we're gonna talk about that when we look at those refined concepts. The second part of the committee's questions was, hey, we've got to be creative about places and spaces that can be used for many different things. And you asked us specifically, can basketball courts and fields serve other adult-centered activities? You asked about the softball field. Would the softball field preclude any of the other activities? Sarah's will get into that. And we say, not really. And she'll talk about that more when we see that. You'll see the actual concepts will have the softball field on it. But in all of this, you might remember, committee, that I sent you the schedule and the listing from Melissa of the amount of sports that use it. So that is what I'm going to ask you to think about in the back of your head. We have from March through November a very active programming of all of those spaces. Basketball, baseball, right? I mean, I'm looking at my list here, and the NAA programs that use the park, there's 8 things from Melissa. So just to remind you, right, we have soccer, we have kickball or kickball, we have a summer baseball camp for one half with Pete Filson, and then of course the Top Guns, the other part, those baseball camps. We have American Legion Baseball, the prep, or the junior league, the youth league, the senior league, right? We have the Delco Baseball League. We have the Flag Football League, and we have Flag Football High School Division. We also found out on the call that rugby is beginning to have some presence here in Narberth as well. So in all of that, your question about can the field be used for other things, it most certainly can. It's going to be designed, of course, for drainage and for fill so that it's a safe recreational place. That will translate into anything else you'd want to use an open field for. The question is it really, are there times, your email said, where it's not being used? I don't know necessarily that there's a lot of those things.
Can I just ask a quick question about that? Most of those that you mentioned, though, are for children that I would imagine after school activity and weekends. Is that correct?
Correct.
So during the day, all of that remains
True.
unused.
Very true.
Okay.
Right. The second part of the facility is very important, parking, right? We wanted to sort of get an idea of this space and parking, which is certainly an issue and a challenge, or can be, or something that people have all gotten used to in Narberth and live with it, right? But how will the parking, how could it be effective? And most specifically, can we integrate parking, use some of our park area to accommodate some parking, and then, what does that do for our available recreational space? Definitely maintaining, and the other question is, with this parking area that we have here, I think we've got 117 total spaces. 117 represents the parking lot and the available space that is on Haverford and on Windsor, right? So 117. That parking area is a large area. We know from the survey that most people do walk or try to bike to the park, right? Is there a need for all of the parking there? Could that area be used to enhance and provide some additional space, right, for the programming or for the environmental considerations of the creek? That is a question, and that's what you're going to see in our recommendations. Right?
Are we about to have any comments or questions?
No, I don't think
Not
so.
yet, we're really trying, we have to focus on getting through
So keep your
information.
questions, and then when you see the actual refined concepts, then we'll let the committee decide how they want to address the questions. But thank you. The last was the question about daylighting the East India Creek. For the committee members, they know basically where this comes from. Our application, your application for DCNR to study the parks included a look, for due diligence sake, at the East India Creek that currently runs in a 8x4, then a 14x4 culvert underneath the park. A culvert that's about 100 years old now, right? So always a good thing to remember. What we did was talk to Pinoni, your borough engineer, to really understand your stormwater management issues, your flooding issues, the permit that you have as a borough to discharge water to the creek, and most importantly, a pollutant reduction plan that you are under to remove sediment, which is your main cause of pollution in the creek. So what we decided to do was to pretend that we had made the decision to daylight the creek, and I contacted the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. And they offer a great thing, a pre-application consultant meeting to get all of the aspects and all of the representatives at DEP who would be involved in reviewing a design like this, get them all in the same room, look at your plan, and ask you questions. So I was able to do that on September the 5th. And Pinoni, your borough, Eric Johnson joined me on that call. And we sat with about 7 people from the DEP and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to say, we haven't decided that we're going to do this, but let's talk about if we did, what are the kinds of things you would need to see this thing through, and what are the kinds of permits that we have to do. From there, I could back out and decide what pre-engineering work needed to be done, additional survey and engineering to accomplish this. And this is a huge lift. This is by far the most costly thing that we would consider for the park. The most impactful for space, the most impactful for time, the most impactful that if we decide to construct it, what it would take out of commission for the park, for just the construction of it, let alone afterwards, right? So we had a great discussion, and the engineers there felt that a joint permit would certainly be required. The good news is they did agree with us that it would sincerely help the borough with their pollutant load reduction, right? And provide additional flood storage area for a very low part of the borough, which is the park. They were very specific about how much credit we could get. They were very specific about minimum buffering areas, even around a yet-to-be-designed cross-section of that area. And certainly the costs would include, aside from the construction cost, all of the studies that we need to do, hydraulic and hydrologic assessments of the stream, biotic, fauna, flora kinds of assessments, an environmental impact study level 2, which has its own checklist of things to be done. All of that would accompany an application, which also requires surveying and engineering, right? So just to sort of prep us for the amount of work to actually make an application if, in fact, we proceeded down that road. Another important concept is the phasing, right? Right now we have an invisible stream underneath that beautiful pavilion and all the way across the street. If you were to remove it from its culvert, right, we'd have to have a temporary stream while we excavated out the culvert, right? We made that excavation and then constructed what the new layout and alignment would be for that stream. So these are important things to talk about, and we'll be documenting them in the report because there exists, a concern in my mind of a 100-year-old culvert. I'm sure it was beautifully built, like we see those culverts that connect us over to Elm Grove, but things don't last forever, right? So that's, I'm not saying that's going to happen at all, but I'm just saying that I discussed this during the meeting, and that basically said, well, that's a maintenance issue. You'd be under a whole different type of permitting. We'd work with you on that. But you have the same issues, right? If somehow that culvert failed, right? Because all of the drainage of Narberth comes to that point. So hopefully that's a good primer for what we learned about daylighting the creek. And really important is the trade-offs of that space. We showed you a plan that estimated roughly a 15-foot wide channel with a certain cross-section. The DEP is requiring another 30 feet on either side of it. And that's just an estimate, right? That's just an estimate, because until we do that pre-engineering and the hydraulic analysis, we don't know if that's what it should be. So whereas we're making assumptions about the things we lose, it could be more. I guess we could let the cat out of the bag that the two refined concepts that you're going to see are not going to show daylighting. But bring up any more questions or things you want to talk about. Because I do have to say, well, we'll get to this in just a second. Elm Grove Park. The question you asked Simone Collins. Does Simone Collins recommend stream bank naturalization? Yes, we absolutely do. There's incredible value, right? The challenges of naturalizing half of the East India Creek in Elm Grove are far easier than a subterranean stream that we're dealing with in Narberth Park.
For those who aren't aware, Elm Grove, to Anita's saying half of it because the other half is actually owned on private property. So we don't really have access to or rights to that.
That's exactly right. As I saw the plan that you had shared with us, that line goes right down the center. It is described legally, so if there isn't a question, but generally it's halfway through the creek. So half of that creek belongs to a private individual, and the wall on their side, the eastern side, is certainly their property. The borough only has control of the western side. It's a length of about 480 feet from the point of the railroad to the pedestrian bridge at Elmwood. It's about 480 feet. What can be accomplished there is still flood capacity, storage, regeneration of groundwater, even for that 480 feet, right? Reduction in velocity, right? So you're spreading out that flow. So you are definitely, retarding that water as it comes crashing through that very channelized part of Elm Grove Park. So there's absolutely an ecological benefit. And I have to say, as you might all have seen, as I went through the KPIs, as all of us did, I would ask them, you had those three concepts, right, for Narberth Park, which ones would you vote for? And I have to tell you that the strongest vote was always for daylighting the creek. There's a heavy understanding of the benefits of ecological restoration in Narberth. It's there. And people would say, but I like the fields. But, could you, whatever, right? So people recognize that trade-off. But that's why I think Elm Grove represents an ability to really talk about some of those ecological restorations and meadow restorations that could really just be a beautiful space. So to answer the question, yes, we definitely recommend a stream bank naturalization. Your other question was, can the riparian improvements be constructed on one side? Yes, they can. And impact and potential liability with neighbors? Absolutely. And I don't know what to tell your solicitor about that, except that we all know, I'm telling you that it can only make things better, including for your neighbor, because the water will be going slower. It has more room to spread out. But we all know that, you don't think, changing a sidewalk to your neighbor's house did anything. But all of a sudden you have water in your basement, right? And they only saw it when you started making a sidewalk. So we know that those things happen, and that is definitely a liability, and it's something that would be considered for the borough. Great. All right, I think that's it.
Yeah. So,
Crescendo here.
we are gonna look at the refined concepts, and again, based on tonight's meeting, we'll make any adjustments that you guys recommend, but this is, the format that we would present to the public as well in October. One of the things, as we set out and looked at this, so we had all this great input, and Anita just did a great job of hitting some of the highlights of the questions that you guys had from your last meeting. But we also want to kind of take into consideration our overall vision for the plan, right? We're looking at meeting all abilities, ages, incorporating connectivity, We also want to look at ecology, so kind of taking that vision that you guys set forth for the plans, as well as all the input we've had from stakeholders and key persons. We started as an office to synthesize all the feedback we got. So we have 2 concepts, refined concepts for Narberth Park, and we have 1 for Elmwood, and then a start of 1 for Town Square. You know, there's been so much focus on Elm Grove and Narberth Park. We haven't forgotten about Town Square, and we had a great meeting, but we kind of want to get a little more feedback before we really refine that one. So we're going to dive into Narberth Park first. And we're going to start with just a reminder of where we were at with the original 3 initial concepts. So these were really just studies in space and size to kind of get initial thoughts going. So you can see concept 3 was that daylighted stream through the site. Based on what Anita was saying in our pre-application meeting, like this would actually get a little wider, right? So it starts to affect the site even more. But so moving forward, this is where we're at with refined concept 1. So this is an overall plan, and then I'm going to zoom into each half of the plan. But just to quick orient people, we have Haverford Ave to the bottom, Wynwood Ave, and then Windsor Ave at the top. Some of the key things that we're recommending, looking at the basketball courts and improving the basketball courts. So today your basketball courts are correctly sized, but they're kind of missing the safety area. It's recommended that you have a 10-foot safety area around your court of play. Right now your bleachers and your team benches are within that safety zone. So this is looking at moving those bleachers out. You have team benches in the middle with a walkway that allows you to go through the basketball courts. And then we're also shifting the basketball courts up to get a little on-street parking here. And that kind of offsets what we've been able to do with greening the existing parking lot and really formalizing flow of traffic through that, developing a little drop-off zone, and then getting some trees around the parking lot, right? So the parking we lost here, we're picking up on the road here. What we've started to do here, we wanted to look at one concept where we thought, what if we really honor the community's desire to have open space and a true kind of a community space? So with that, we looked at the tennis court area and said, what if that was a green space? And we really let this function for community gatherings. So we relocated the restrooms, which used to be down here. This is now a central building that would have a concession stand that still faces the basketball courts. You can have restrooms to one side, storage in the middle, and then a little performance stage that looks out over a lawn, right? And then at the end of the lawn, you kind of have a refined, kind of redeveloped playground area. Still keeping community gardens, still keeping the 90-foot baseball field pretty much the same, but then looking at your secondary baseball field and really developing that into a softball baseball field. And really formalizing an infield for that works for softball. So I'm going to kind of scroll to the next page. Well, one more thing I do want to talk about. The other thing that we looked at is we really wanted to figure out how we could get bike circulation around the park. So based on a lot of feedback through various conversations with all the stakeholders and key persons, we looked at the idea of switching the one-way direction for Haverford Ave. So that would be one way into town, and then pairing that with a one-way for Windsor Ave going out. So what this allows us to do is develop a bike lane, true bike lane, on the south side of Haverford, and then a true bike lane on the north side of Windsor. We still can maintain on-road parking along Windsor on the south side. You do lose the on-road parking on the north side, and then you do lose the parallel parking on Haverford. So with the way we have it shown here, we're losing a total of 35 spaces around the park. If you didn't do the dedicated bike lane and you just went to a share the road, so it's a share road down the middle and the biker has the same provenance as a pedestrian, we'd still recommend the one-ways, but then you could still keep the on-road parallel parking, and then you would have a slight gain in parking. So just kind of want to throw that out there as we kind of think about circulation around the park. The other thing we've done is really looked at improving the sidewalk as much as we can to being 10 foot wide around the park. With this concept and the road configuration with the bike lane, we do hit a pinching point because we're holding the curb line, right? We're not changing the curb lines. So we do hit a pinch point at the dugout of the field. So this is the one section where that sidewalk does narrow down back to 5 feet. Okay, so zooming a little bit closer in on this area. So really we want to make sure we're focusing on circulation and creating pathway systems throughout the park. We also wanted to kind of create a sense of space and entry into the park, right? So that's one reason why we thought it was very important to look at the parking lot and green that parking lot so that you have a sense of arrival if you're coming by car. But then also if you're walking here, we started to develop nodes. At A, we have kind of a node here. At E, we have a node here. And one of the things we've learned, especially not just talking to the history KPI, but also your Narberth Athletic Association, there's so much history with both the basketball courts and the Legion baseball field. We thought that these little entry plazas could be a place where somehow you celebrate that history, be it through a really unique paving that's maybe you reflect it in the pavement, maybe it's a plaque, maybe it's actual, informational sign, right? But somehow you kind of capture the idea that, okay, this is a special place to the community and the greater region. If some people don't know, there's Wilt Chamberlain played here, right? And then Kobe Bryant. So they all played in the summer leagues here. So there's a lot of history with the courts. Coming up from the courts, again, we kind of have the idea of a plaza that kind of captures that whole stage area, a little bit of a hard surface so that if you want to dance, you're able to kind of be at the foot of the stage. But when this isn't a performance, it becomes a picnic table area, right? You move a few tables into there, you have the shade, the steps become informal seating. This opens up onto a lawn. I think some people brought up ideas of the park in Ardmore where they have the Adirondack chairs. So the idea that maybe you have some Adirondack chairs at the back of the lawn. But then this starts to give into where we're looking at a stone dust pavement. So you have more, again, of hard surface on the back of the lawn, where maybe you have movable bistro tables, plant trees right into the stone dust, so it becomes more of like a European piazza feeling. So that kind of becomes the backdrop to your performance area. And then that naturally kind of bleeds into your playground area. When we're looking at these concepts, we put in space of equipment, but it's not what we think you should build, right? It's to give you an idea of size and budget. And kind of the key point here is, this piece of equipment needs that much safety surface around it because of the fall zone, right? So here we're looking at a 3-bay swing so that we have top swings, accessible swings, and then regular kind of belt swings that we all know, right? So that actually takes up some of the most space out of every playground. Swings need a lot of fall zones because you can really get going, right? Then we looked at a zone for like 12 to 5-year-olds, kind of a composite play with climbing, slides, balancing, and then also a tot area that again has that play that's geared towards younger children. And then also the idea of maybe like an accessible spinner. So it's something that anyone could kind of walk right up onto, roll a chair up onto, and you can kind of play within that as well.
Can I interrupt you just for a second? One of the big takeaways from the parents and young families was, you might remember one of our concepts had, tot lot and older children lot. No, and I actually felt the same way. They really don't want them separated, right? That is a nightmare for logistics for parents.
We heard that Friday too.
Okay, yeah,
A number of parents said the same thing.
Absolutely, right. So I think what Sarah's showing you is that we certainly heard that they are looking for equipment for older children, right? Something more challenging, but of course, we're looking at it in one location instead.
Yeah, and I think also if you look at today's playground, there's an actual fence that creates a separation between the older and younger areas. So even though from a play manufacturer point of view, there's always going to be play equipment that's going to have a sticker on it that says it's for these ages because we live in the world we live in, but they can be integrated in a way that they're in the same space. So I think, this could evolve to something where maybe it's even more standalone pieces of equipment. And that's something that would get worked out through in the final construction documentations as you really start to dive into what pieces of equipment you want in a playground. So just to kind of close out this area, still kind of incorporating the community gardens, We do kind of lose some of them to get a walkway through here, so we're kind of developing additional beds off to this side. As I said, kind of creating a key entrance off of the library, letting that be a plaza so you have a sense of arrival from that side as well. Maybe even reconfiguring a new planter that has signage that actually says Narberth Park. So that would kind of face the road, people leaving town. And then here again, another little stone dustpan here. And the idea here is maybe you have benches, they can face two-sided, so they might face the playground or they might face the street, depending on how you want to interact with the space. And then looking at an improved crosswalk here. So with both of these, we're looking at the idea of tabling the crosswalks, maintaining the bike lane through there as well, but then having a bump out per B&P, so that would help define the off-street parallel parking, but also help with drainage. When you have two tables at an intersection, drainage is going to be a big issue, right? Because water has nowhere to go. So that's where this would have that curb return would pick up that water coming off the street. Last, again, just formalizing this field, having true spectator seating that ties into the walkway network as well. So as we go down to the other end, so again, you can see that more generous sidewalk for the most part. This is the existing score sign, and then you have your existing dugouts. What we're doing here is really, again, developing that third kind of entry node. Again, this might be a place where we really want to do something special with that plaza to kind of recognize the Legion field and its history. And then defining a new walkway that would connect all the way down, and then it'd bring you up into the War Memorial Plaza. So you really start to create some connectivity on this end of the park and give people a place to kind of go either way. Improve bleachers here. I think I'm estimating about 270 people. We were told 200 to 250 on a really big game, so I think that more than accommodates, but is much more compact than the bleachers that are there today. So what you start to pick up here, where we have a bunch of evergreens that are, for better or worse, kind of nearing the end of their life. There's a lot of storm damage that has happened to those white pines and spruces. Recommending allowing that to be more of a lawn hillside, so that you have a viewing potential as well from that lawn hillside, and planting new either shade trees or understory trees along the hillside. The last thing we kind of looked here was the idea of a secondary path that was more minor, that would be kind of at the top of that hill, cutting down across to Windsor, maybe at the top here, is this a touch screen? At the top here, having a little node that maybe that's a bike repair station, since you're kind of on either side of the Greenway bike trail. It could also have bike racks for this end of the park, and then leading into a pathway with some benches along that. And that we're thinking here that maybe this becomes a themed pathway. And this is something where we want maybe a little feedback from both you and the public. That is it focused on pollinator gardens, on native plantings, on being mindful, but having an opportunity for this to have some sort of destination when baseball is not in effect. Okay, so that's concept one.
I'm just gonna get rid of that, sorry.
No, that's
I
okay.
changed something.
Did I touch something?
No, I think that was my fault.
I'll take a sip of water.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Looking at concept two.
You might just want to point out that corner of Wynwood
Thank
and
you.
where the
Sure.
Greenway comes in, or is
Yeah.
scheduled to come in.
Do you mind putting that next to it? Okay. So yeah, here, currently the trail comes out at the driveway. There is a blinking light there. One of the things that we really wanted to look at was if we are gonna kind of align the Greenway along Haverford, there's not a lot of grade at the wall here. So working with that neighboring property owner, looking at redesigning the walls so that you can bring the trail straight through there and move it down here. This would also kind of set up the possibility, if there were to ever be a light on this side of the bridge, to allow for a one-way cycle through the tunnel in an expanded walkway. That works with that language, right, by moving this down, because it would be outside of the intersection. And then also improving the crosswalk here. Also looking at improving the crosswalk here. So we did look at with the one-way direction kind of tightening up the corners on all the intersections so that we can get true crosswalks kind of closer to, so that they're shorter distances. This one, if you recall, kind of makes a turn in the road. It's a very odd crosswalk. Coming down to the bridge itself, this is where we're looking at just a little node here where the trail's going to narrow down, so it gives people a place to stop and wait as they're going to walk through the tunnel, and then relocating the art piece that's located right around this area into that plaza, so it kind of has a home. So with concept 2, everything over here is pretty much the same. The parking's the same. What we started to look at was, what if we really do feel a skate park is needed in Narberth Borough? So how can we fit a skate park in, still maintain the pavilion, the performance area, the basketball courts, the playground, the fields? What does that start to look like? So with this concept, we looked at the idea that the pavilion building becomes kind of appendage onto the library, right? And you know, this, you have to kind of, we haven't looked through it architecturally, right? Because I'm sure there's windows on the end of that facade, but this is just kind of thinking of it as a concept. So again, that would house restrooms, storage, and concession stand. What that allows us to do is kind of relocate the lawn looking out this direction. So your playground still has all the same amenities and kind of that same area. You know, we've laid this out in both concepts so that we're avoiding kind of the trees, and the idea is you're maintaining all the trees in that playground area. Even within the lawn, we're keeping all the existing trees. But then we started to look at, how does a skate park fit into here? So the idea here is that the skate park would sit higher than everything around it, right? So that starts to help out with some of the structural issues that Anita was talking about. So this would be kind of a stepped entrance, a little ramp off to the side, but that kind of faces the performance area, so that becomes a little secondary gathering place during performances. And then here you would have 2 steps kind of looking out towards the basketball court. So it has a face to both sides of the park. And then this is kind of just, again, a conceptual idea of different skate park apparatus with ledges, ramps, staircases, pipes, railings, things like that. So this is by no means meant to be a skate park design, but it starts to show you it is based off of a real design in terms of size and spaces. So it shows you how much fits in that area. The last thing we wanted to look at, because we heard that shade is important in the skate park, right? We often don't include that. So we started to look at the idea of, again, having those benches that face both out towards the performance lawn as well as in towards the skate park, and kind of getting some trees in there. And then also between our drop-off, kind of creating this little custom planter on the backside that would have a ledge that could be skatable, or becomes a sitting area that kind of looks out across the park. So that's kind of the concept of the skate park. I will say that the skate park, to maintain kind of the size lawn that you currently have for performances, and then also create circulation that connects to all of our amenities. This is about 7,000 square feet, right? So this is much smaller than what the skate park people are asking for, but that doesn't mean it's not a viable skate park, right? It has more equipment than you currently have in the tennis courts, and a more meaningful relationship to one another. Okay, sorry, I should have gone to the next one. So yeah, so this, you can kind of see that seat ledge. These would be steps looking out that way, steps coming this way, but then this would be wall along these walkways. And we're only talking about 18 inches to 2 feet of separation. We're not talking about multiple feet. But again, basketball courts, same size, slightly different how the walkways kind of form around them. And then again, walkways coming in from the playground. We still kind of have the stone dust paving with bistro tables at the end of the lawn here again. Maybe more planted areas, but then open lawn area where it starts to look out over the fields. The one thing that's tricky with this is you do want the concession stands to kind of face out this way. So that kind of puts the bathrooms on the back side. What we could look at if storage was at D, kind of having some sort of breezeway here. So if you're going from the playground, you can kind of quick go through a breezeway and get to the bathrooms on the back side there, instead of like having to go all the way around. But that's pretty minor. Yeah, so again, everything is the same on this side in each concept, so we won't really go over this one again. But here they are side by side. I don't know if we can keep going and look at all three areas, or if we want to stop and have the committee give feedback on Narberth Park.
I think we should give feedback on Narberth Park right now. Do you agree with that, or do you want to wait to see what Elm Grove and? Sure. Do we want to first? Committee first? Are there any questions or concerns looking at this that the committee itself has? And then, of course, we will turn to our public. But again, this is a committee meeting. The real input is going to happen on October 9th when we have the public meeting for everybody. So I guess I should actually, Dennis Bergen, who can't be here, he's in, what is it, Norway? Is that what we just?
He's in Norway, yeah.
Yes. He didn't get to be here. He wrote a few notes. Some of it I'm going to pass by, but I do want to make sure that he gets an opportunity. Okay. He spoke to members of the LMT. For those of you who may not be aware, Dennis has concerns about adding a permanent skate park at the and not having other types of activities for a broader community. So his comments are going to be along that line. He had an opportunity to speak with members of the LM Township. They provided information on why they've not been able to reach an agreement for a skate park. And that apparently they've said that they would be willing to help fund a skate park here. So Dennis is asking why, if they have the money to do that, why in our small park does it have to happen versus in LM, where there's a much larger area. He said that he looked at close area skate parks. I guess there's one in South Ardmore. I'm sorry, I might be reading that wrong. It seems odd that money has been offered to offer substantial more ground to provide such a park. So he'd like to know more about why they don't want to build a skate park in Lower Marion. Can
I answer that just?
Yes.
At least what they've told us.
Yeah.
So having spoke both with Lower Marion and also the skate park groups, they've looked for space within the Lower Marion Park. And I think like any developed older community, park space is very valuable. So it's always a trade-off. So they've literally can't find the amount of space they need to develop a skate park without taking out something else. So that is what they've told us.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. He also noted that right now Narberth is considered the regional, I guess, home for the basketball courts and the baseball, because we have the 90 football and the basketball courts. He questions whether we need to be the regional home for a skate park as well for this township. Mentioning that Haverford, I guess, has a 6,000 square foot skate park, and Radnor has one that's about 10,000 feet, and they both have significantly more park space than us. If half of the existing old tennis courts were to be used for tennis or pickleball and the other half for skate park, then he felt that would better bring a wider community into the park, because you have both the older, though he did quote that there's over 1 million 13 to 17-year-old pickleball players now, and it's growing every year exponentially. So he was saying that with if we were to rethink how we're using that space, could we foresee doing a smaller skate park and also then a pickleball court or something like that would be more intergenerational, that would bring more folks to the park. And then he reviewed Michael's thought-out visits to the area skate parks. They have different usage. So those were his comments about the skate park. I don't know if anyone wants to interject their thoughts about skate parks, because this is the time for us to be able to say
Are we
something.
doing questions and comments now, and then we'll hear
Yeah,
community
then
stuff
we'll,
before we provide direction?
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I have a question. So Dennis, in his concerns and comments and questions, he said he spoke to Lower Marion Township and they said they would be open to helping us fund our
I-
skate park,
That's what I got from what I read from here. Yes.
like as an idea, like.
So Lower Marion has money.
Or maybe you
budget-
said that.
Sorry, so Lower Marion does have money budgeted
Okay.
in their budget for the development of skate park. They
Right.
do not have a place
They
to
don't have the
do it.
space, right.
So they're willing to partner with Narberth to develop a skate park and bring money to the table, yes.
The full amount. Sorry.
Full amount?
Oh,
Full amount.
we don't know how much it's gonna cost. You have a certain amount budgeted.
We've done the studies.
What was that statistic that he's noted about the amount of, what was it, 13 to 17-year-old pickleball players?
Yeah, he said, let me tell you
Because I'm
this.
curious what the number is of that same age group that skateboards. I would imagine it's probably considerably more.
Then, just as an interjection there's a question on the survey, and I don't know which one it is, but it asks, what activities, do people in your age, in your household participate in? So you can actually see
Oh,
the
interesting.
number that people have responded pickleball from that age group. It's in the
So I
survey.
think, and the general feedback that I saw, and firsthand heard from people was there are places to play tennis and pickleball within walking distance, and there isn't really for skateboarding.
Where?
I can answer that question as a neutral party. General Lane Park, Wynwood Valley Park, which is
That's
next
not
to
walking.
That's not
Penn, the General Wayne Park is walking distance to some parts of Narberth, so please wait till I finish my sentence. And so that is an example of a walking distance park that has ample tennis, pickleball, and then within a 5-minute drive, there's a pickleball courts and tennis courts by Penwood Elementary.
Yeah, and I think, we've talked a lot about pickleball, at least we have throughout the whole kind of key person. I think we've talked about it as a committee. I think if you were gonna consider pickleball here, I would recommend a single court. I don't think you wanna look at a pickleball complex, which would be 4 courts. I mean, you're so close to residential houses that having more than 1 court dedicated to pickleball in this park, I think would be overwhelming for the surrounding residences. And that's just based off of our experience of working with similar communities and just the resistance to pickleball.
So I have a question, actually, looking at the concepts, and I think this came from me. I was talking about softball. Because I understood through through community comment, actually, that girls they go into softball. And boys, it's a baseball. My question was, and I didn't know if it were possible, looking at the existing baseball, is there any way that it can be used for both? But I understand that's not possible.
It is possible.
Yes,
So what
I'm
we're
sorry.
proposing here, sorry.
I feel like really strongly about this. So, Narberth doesn't have a softball team.
So can I speak to that? Because they did. They had a softball program leading up to COVID.
No,
and
they
then
did
it
not.
dwindled.
No, they
That
did
is
not.
what we were told by NAA.
No, they did not. It's Lower Marion has the softball. Girls softball is only through Lower Marion.
The question is it not here because there's nowhere for girls to play?
There's
But
not enough
nonetheless,
girls here.
nonetheless, the question I have is, if we're looking for additional space, and as you said, there's no existing softball. My question had been, is there a way to allow girls a girls softball if it ever wanted to get started, because we do have a growing population of young people to be able to use the
So-
baseball.
Currently, let's just talk about this field. So this field, we're showing it as an improved skinned infield. That doesn't have to happen right away. Currently, it is a baseball field that serves both younger kids on a 50-foot baseball and older kids on a 60-foot base path. So that field is completely used and programmed by the baseball league. It could easily accommodate softball if you wanted to improve it and skin the infield. It is also used by the Quickball League, which is co-ed. And if you're not familiar with Quickball, it's kind of the alternative to T-ball, where you kind of run a quick session of games where they do hitting, base running, and then they play a quick 1 inning, right? And they cycle kids through really quickly. So it is also used for that, which is co-ed.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
And to add to that, you bring up a great point, an opportunity to address older recreation outlets, which is co-ed adult softball is a popular sport. Don't ask me for statistics, but it is a popular older person sport, which would be opening up physical activity options for that population in our town by simply taking the grass off of what is an existing space. And it doesn't affect the current Babe Ruth fields.
Sarah, could you also speak to the effect on the football program?
Yeah, so what we're not showing on this map is a football field, which that generally runs kind of east-west at a diagonal. It does intersect with the current 90-foot base path, and it does kind of intersect with the existing baseball field here as well. So in some ways, so one of the things when you look at this field, there are issues with it, and I would like everyone to think of it as a multi-purpose field, because for all intents and purposes it is. It just hasn't been developed like a true multi-purpose field. So the grading on the field is a little haphazard in areas. So one of the things that we would recommend is kind of, as this area is improved at a future time and day, that you really look at how it's graded and consider slight regrading of the field to really make sure, because what happens now, and there's different opinions on why it exists, but there is a lip kind of here, so that affects both playing in the outfield as well as the football field, right? So that's kind of a safety concern when you start to think about that. And then also, in some ways, having this be dirt and not have individual dirt base paths intersecting with the football field creates a more even space. So yes, the football field would be playing over that dirt infield, but it would be one consistent surface as opposed to multiple changes in surfaces. Thank you.
I've got some comments for there, but I have some questions first. Regarding in defined concept 2, y'all were showing functionally the addition to the back of the library. I seem to recall back when there was conversation about a deck addition to the library, that there was like geotechnical work done that determined that was going to be really difficult to do over there. And I wasn't sure if that had come up yet, because I would just be interested in knowing about that, because I'm sure there will be price implications for that.
I don't remember hearing anything about the geotech.
We haven't been shared, but obviously you guys are doing work to the building right now that was probably based on some settling that happened over the years. So I think there's a difference between a deck and a building where, there's a more substantial foundation that would go into a building. But it might be a cost factor to consider, yeah.
Can you remind me about the traffic pattern on Windsor and Narberth Ave for concept 2?
So both concepts are the same in terms of what we're proposing for traffic pattern. So it would be the reverse one-way, so changing Haverford so that if you're coming through the tunnel, you would turn on to Haverford to go into town. And then if you're leaving town, you're going out Windsor and you're turning up this way. So the idea with that is it really kind of resolves the traffic issue that you have here where everyone's kind of waiting to turn out onto Haverford and gets stuck when you're leaving town.
And everybody is probably thinking the same thing that I am, which is That's never gonna fly in Narberth because we don't have a bridge, an operational bridge for the other side of town.
Right.
So they wouldn't even consider this.
So, and we should say well, eventually you'll have a bridge, I hope.
Yeah.
But all of this involves a traffic study. And, in one of our meetings that came up not too long ago, I believe Narberth was two-way, was that what someone had brought up? So I think, roads do evolve, roads can change, and new traffic patterns can be set. It does require studies, and it requires buy-in by neighbors, but it also just requires being willing to change, right? So.
Can I talk to that just a
Yeah.
minute? Because it's really important. There's a lot of things that are precipitating that. One is the county is looking at the greenway alignment through the center of the borough, right? The borough has done 2 previous pop-up dedicated bike lanes, one on Windsor and one on Haverford, to test drive that idea. So, and the committee in the KPIs spoke with the police, spoke with the fire, because there's physical geometric turning implications and traffic implications, especially to the larger vehicles. There were no apparent red flags, but everybody understood that if you're talking about changing direction and you're talking about really designing for multi-modes, then you need a traffic study. And it should include parking as well on those streets.
Where that also came up, committee, again, the parent young families, we all know that tunnel is just frightening. And it was a very key point of parents and young families. And that KPI, I think the KPI with the environmental group felt very strongly that the recommendations we make, Simone Collins, to the committee include discussion on these issues of traffic and the tunnel. And we know that that's, technically it is outside of our scope, but accessing the parks is so important that it has to be part of it. So what Sarah has shown, and we'll look at it more clearly when we actually get that PDF of the plan and we can zoom in, does it make sense? And we certainly got up to date, it took a while, but we did get up to date on the circle, everything that's been talked about, with a rail bridge and, ownership of the railroad, our possibilities are really limited. We could think big. People definitely want to connect right between those 2 parks. That would be heaven, right? That type of pedestrian tunnel is a huge lift. Probably bigger than daylighting the streets. Actually, definitely bigger than daylighting the street. So anyway, I just want to say that even though we have shown it that way, the whole issue of accessibility in the vehicular movement and parking is the purview of what you would recommend as more study, which I know is more planning, but completes the picture for the parks.
Ultimately, that intersection, is that, in terms of what gets done with that intersection, that falls under Lower Marion's responsibility rather than Narberth, is that correct?
I think technically it's in your township. But
so which part?
What part of it?
So this is, sorry, let's just go back to this plan. So this orange line is our understanding of the township line. So all of Wynwood Ave is in the borough.
I'm talking about the tunnel, what's going on with the tunnel section?
So the tunnel is in the borough, but it's part of the Amtrak right away. So it becomes a negotiation with them. I think what you can look at, if you wanted to look at signalization, is you have a signal down here. You could work with PennDOT to be like, would it make sense to have a signal on this side? And then you have a single, you're not running traffic both ways through the tunnel. It's a one-way, one at a time, and that opens up a wider roadway for pedestrians.
I guess my question is, if we, is that something that we need sign off from Lower Merion on to proceed with?
I think it's first, it's an engineering study, because I think since you're affecting a state road down here, PennDOT is gonna be the first person that you're talking to. Because to time a signal up here, you have to work with their signal on a state road. So it's gonna start at PennDOT, it's gonna start with your traffic borough engineer, looking at it from a feasibility point of view, and then kicking it up to PennDOT to say, is this something you're open to? And then it's probably a communication with Lower Marion, but I think they would be the last, it's not like you need their approval. Don't quote me on that, but that would be my understanding of the situation.
So I think you said the skate park area is shown as 7,000 square feet.
Yeah, depending on how you cut it, or, because, this cuts out, so the actual blue and apparatus is 7,000.
So just because when I eyed it up, it looked like it was in roughly the same area that it is today, so I was wondering where the shrinkage kind of comes from. Obviously, it looks like it cuts in from the parking lot. Is it the
It's all
basketball
the
court
pathways
shifting?
going around it. So the basketball does come up. So you're shifting the basketball up, so that's cutting into your existing tennis courts, and then it's all the walkways around it. And then you're also kind of developing this drop-off area, so that's cutting into it.
And do we have a sense of like what the cost of shifting like the basketball courts might be ballpark? Just because shifting the basketball courts at a certain price point might make more sense.
You're building new basketball courts.
Right.
So, yeah, it's an investment, but at the same time, yes, they function today, but 20 years down the road, there's only, things wear out, right? So, everything we're looking at here today, it's more of a, does this meet the values and the vision of the plan? And then, once we hit the plan that you guys like, so these are just refined concepts. The next stage is to present a draft master plan. That draft master plan will have the costs. It will have the phasing. I mean, maybe the basketball courts stay as they are for the next 20 years and you don't rebuild them until 20 years down the road when you're ready to tackle the parking lot and green that parking lot and build the basketball courts, right? But what you want to make sure is whatever happens in the space above the basketball courts fits your future plan, right? So that draft plan, we'll present that to the planning commission. That's open to the public to give comment on for a month. And then we adopt a final plan based off of that comment. So there's still an iteration of commenting on plans.
I want to rewind just a little bit to the baseball, softball conversation. I think just for clarification, what I think Rebecca and Dennis were saying, that smaller field would be for softball.
It could accommodate softball.
So you guys were suggesting potentially having one field that could do all. Would that be a scheduling nightmare because there's so many baseball leagues and things that use it? Because if we were able to expand into where the smaller field is, could that accommodate 2 very small pickleball courts? And the skate park would make a lot of people happy.
So this is not, I just want to make sure we're all clear, this is not a new field.
It's there.
Right, no, right.
It is an existing field that is scheduled.
Right, so I'm saying, I think you both were kind of saying that, could we use the one field for everybody's purposes?
So no, the 90-foot baseball field cannot meet everybody's purposes.
Right.
Sorry to be clear, sorry if I wasn't clear about that before. So a 90-foot field is they're becoming less and less common. Most days you only see them at high schools or in colleges. But where they do exist, they have a strong community. And your field has a long history of community.
Right, no, I know
Yeah.
that, yeah.
So, and they program it as much as they can. They do have kids, I think they have kids starting at age 15 through adults that are playing on that field.
12.
Well, the 12-year-olds are playing on the other field.
No,
they
seventh,
big
they've done the big
Yeah,
field,
they kinda
seventh and
They
eighth
do,
grade,
okay,
CYO.
sorry.
And the other field is 5th and 6th, CYO uses it. You guys didn't mention ACYO, but.
Sorry, and we have that all in
Sorry,
the schedule.
What I had talked about was strictly NAA. We know that St. Margaret's has their exact CYO program.
So I think the idea of the softball field was that at that age level, you can develop a baseball field with a portable mound and also have it work for softball. You can have it be a 70-foot, 60, 50-foot path. You move the bases and it accommodates a very wide age group. So that was the idea with that improvement to that field.
Thanks for that.
And that does accommodate football as well.
Yes, you would still be able to overlay the football field across it.
You're gonna change the grading or something?
I mean, the grading is
level it?
minor, and it's more just something that needs to happen no matter what you do with your fields moving
Okay.
forward.
And grading it, Rebecca, certainly improves drainage issues, because there is,
We do have that issue.
So, you're not far from water, I guess I said mouthful when I said that, right? Right, so, but the regrading is, it's definitely on the list.
I do want to say, we're at 8:20. This is meant to be an hour and a half meeting. Obviously, it's not gonna be an hour and a half meeting. I would like to just set out that we try to get through by 9.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So are there any more comments here?
Can I just ask another question about the skate park real quick? This is the first time we're looking at these refined concepts. So I'm wondering if with the skate park and where the playground is and the green spaces, if is there any other room on kind of where the trees are right now to shift any of those facilities?
This area?
Yes.
So these are really mature trees. So we've been tasked with trying not to affect trees. So with the trees in this area, you already have a lot of active use happening around these trees. These trees are just an open lawn and have never had anything really happening under them. So to develop something under them would be much more difficult in terms of not impacting those mature trees versus kind of working in an area where trees have already been impacted, their roots might have already naturally gone other ways because you have active play facilities in here. So that's why we really haven't. But I think there is the opportunity to kind of look at here, because what we did lose in both these concepts is kind of the little half basketball court. I think there is a place that maybe we look at the idea that you could have a little multi-purpose court that had a half court and a pickleball court kind of maybe in this area. And we could explore that if that was something people wanted to look at.
And that's what I was wondering, in one of the earlier concepts, there had been this like multi-purpose area, which I thought was important. And if there's a way of looking at doing that in that shaded area anyway, I think that would be really helpful for community who has an interest in things like that.
Yeah, whether it's that or whether it's moving that lawn pavilion space into that area, I think losing that multi-purpose space would be a loss because it gets used all the time by the kids. Just tossing basketballs or to have some paved area.
Yeah, just so you're willing to lose the lawn?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Saying, either moving the lawn into that tree area.
Yeah, that's such a great idea.
Well,
Because that's already a lawn.
but the key thing with the lawn is that you have a performance stage and that people are facing
I don't
the
know if
performance
that's
stage.
feasible. Moving the
So like, again, trying to put a whole building over here is gonna be difficult. And preserving trees.
Yeah.
But getting a court area over here, I think is feasible.
I do have one comment before we
Please.
move on, just really quick. I recommend we go as big as possible with the skate park now. Instead of cutting out here, cut out here, it won't affect the fields. And then we put overlay lines on the basketball courts for pickleball with rolling nets. And that would be used during the non-peak basketball court usage time. So during the daytime when people are at school, those courts are empty because I live across the street and no one's using the basketball courts when I'm commuting to work. But when I go to play tennis and pickleball over in Lower Merion, before work, those are being utilized.
Yeah.
So that's a way to cut the baby in half. Then that's a biblical reference. Anyway, this would bridge the need for both and not put skateboarders and pickleballers at odds. And then we could commit to finding more suitable permanent pickleball locations somewhere in the borough. That's all I got.
Thank you, Dennis. So that's one thought, doing that. The other is, of course, looking at that multi-purpose area up near the trees. Which,
Well, I think those are two kind of different areas, because I think, so when you have program basketball courts like this,
yeah,
it's your teenagers, your older adults are gonna dominate these sports. That little half court really meets the needs of younger kids that wanna play but can't get on the big court.
Okay.
So I think it's two different things, but I think we can explore both.
Real quick, because y'all had brought up the differing abilities in terms of evaluating a skate park. So does your current design meet that rubric?
Again, this is not a design, this is a space plan.
In terms of the spatial.
But
the spatial
as far
needs.
as I know, I would say yes. In terms of what I modeled it after, I think there are things that would be challenging, but it would also meet a beginner's needs.
It allows for having a permanent skate park, recognizing that there's a lot of other needs that are out there for this park. So we have about 5 minutes before we have to go on to looking at the other park. And we want to give folks an opportunity to say something, but keep in mind, it's really going to be on October 9th where you're going to be given all the time in terms of making comments. I know you've had your hand up, so I did want to give you, please, if you could limit it to a minute or so, that would be fantastic.
Well, one of the things that was really important was that little basketball court, because I do know how much the little kids, and just exactly what you said about the older kids dominating. As a resident of Narberth, like I really value the walkability. So personally, I would not want to have any part of the park removed for extra parking, because I think this park should be about the Narberth residents, and that's another thing that I was like kind of interested is like why so many Lower Merion residents are like some of the stakeholders like for the skate park, because I feel like this should be like a real Narberth thing. And the only other thing I would say is I just kind of didn't really understand why the skate park kind of got put in the plans and tennis just got eliminated without any discussion, because I thought in the survey it was like 50-50 between the residents.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, and I'll try not to address every comment, but that's great feedback. I think with, how this evolved was based off of feedback that we received in meetings and conversations with the committee. So, you've already not had tennis courts for 4 years. We were kind of given feedback that there are tennis courts within the area. So that's why we kind of went down the skate plaza road and not really looked at giving those back over to tennis courts. But again, this is just a refined concept. It's not even the draft plan, so there's time for that to evolve.
There's a woman in the back in the green.
Yeah, hi, I'm Virginia Davis. I am not an ARB. I live just on the other side of Thomas Wayne Apartments. So I, just so you know that. And I had a longer statement, which I'll save for October 9th, but I just I'm here as a mom of a skateboarder who loves the Narberth Skate Park, who has, he's right here, Griffin, and is over every day, and it's just, it's a great way for kids that are not into traditional sports to be athletic, be creative. A lot of times with skate parks or skateboarding, there's not an instructor. You're learning, you're following, you're trying again, and you're learning a ton along the way. And so I just wanted to express our support for a skate park. We spend a lot of time in Narberth. We may not live here, and in that way, but I work here, we eat here, we play here.
Your hearts are here in Narberth.
Right. And we would love a permanent skate park that had, that was common.
Thank you. And I believe there was someone over here. I thought you had their hand up. Yes.
I did. To bring back the conversation, or my point is about tennis. I'm wondering, would it be possible to reopen this survey that was closed today? Because I think there are a lot of voices that didn't get to that survey in time.
It's not closed.
Oh, it's not closed?
It's not closed.
It
says it was closed on the site.
It
says it's closed. Says it closed on the 9th.
We'll double check, sorry.
We're supposed to close September 9th.
Yeah, I think we might have audit.
So we can go over
what
that
we will have is
tonight.
after the next public meeting, we will have a feedback form. So it's not like we're ending the ability to give feedback. It's just at some point, the survey kind of has to be like, okay, it's been open for 4 months.
Right, and I can explain why it actually yes. So what we try to do is have it completely open until we come up to the draft plan. And in our original schedule for the project, that's where we were today, and we were gonna be meeting to talk about the draft plan. However, it became very clear, there was so much to say, the KPIs were so long, the discussion at our first draft meeting, the draft concepts, the committee definitely felt they needed more time. So we inserted this meeting, and thank you for reminding me, we never.
So the link is still live, it just was advertised as closing, so we haven't closed that. So we'll take off that.
Yeah, Ellen will take care of that.
Did
Thank you.
Did you want to set a new date?
It'll be,
We talked about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be October, like leading up to the refined concept meeting.
Exactly.
Yeah, just let me know what day and I'll, make that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And then you have to let people know, because like how many people actually filled out that
Well,
survey?
Over 600. We had an amazing response rate.
That is.
Of 5,000, that's actually a phenomenal return rate.
I think a lot of my neighbors
Spread the
never
word.
saw it.
We
I'll say
tried to get it out there
I
in
mean,
so many different
We
ways.
sure did spread the word, ma'am, and Michael handed out cards. Remember how hot it was on July 4th? He
This
stood out
man,
there for half the day handing out cards to say, please, take the survey. So,
Aim for.
and it was in the newsletter every week, and it was in the community Facebook page, so
there's signage throughout.
At the farmer's market.
that's one thing that we committed to early on in this process was making everyone aware. So, and they did a
Thank you.
phenomenal job.
So I'm going to ask now that we go on to the next concept. Keep in mind, October 9th, 7 p.m. is your opportunity to have at it. But I do recommend that in the interim, you're all here, spread the word, but also go on to the Narberth site for the master park plan and look at these and really think through what you like, what you don't, and be prepared to make your statements on that date.
Is it safe to assume that the daylighting of the creek is just not an option that we have to?
I think that's pretty safe.
Yeah. See, we've made it, we haven't voted yet.
I think we're all, well,
Yeah,
sorry.
right. I just wanna make sure, like, so it's.
We got that space back.
Thank you.
And just to that, I mean, I think the one thing that does come through, and the fact that you're all here tonight, is that Narberth Park is a beloved park. And we want to make sure that we meet all the needs of your community. And it's going to be really hard to meet everybody's need in that park because it is 7 acres, right?
6.25.
Yeah. Rounding way up. So, just, I think our goal whenever we approach any community is to hear everything you say, and I hope you all felt like we listened to you tonight. But then we kind of have to take it and, I don't want to say make the sausage because I think there's a lot more work that goes into it than that. But we want to make sure at the end that you feel like you understand how the final plan is arrived at, right? We want to make sure it's transparent and you understand how we go through making these decisions and that it's not easy, right? And we want to make sure that at the end you have a plan that reflects your community's values and meets your needs, but it might not meet everybody's desire.
And is Sabine Park completely off the table? Like, that's the one?
At this point, it is only because this project was focusing on Station Circle, Elm Grove, and Narberth Park. I look to our 2 borough council folks in terms of Sabine. That will certainly at some point, depending upon the decision that the borough makes, be opened up for consideration as.
And that was purely because of a funding. So when this whole process is being funded through a grant. So when they applied for the grant, the future of Sabine was kind of not unknown, but just not fixed in terms of, so it wasn't part of the grant application. That's the only reason why it's not part of this whole stuff.
Well, it was initially part of the grant application, but we got direction from the
Right,
state
thank
that
you.
recommended that we defer that to a future planning in order to not run afoul of the requirements for the federal funds. So that was
Thank you.
why.
It was,
Yeah.
I was thinking, like, if
timing and money.
with 6.25 acres and we have another plot of land, if you were designing your house, you'd say, well, I've got this much room on my first floor, and then I have a second floor where I can add another bedroom or a bathroom. So if there's if that other park just is not forgotten about to say, like, there might be opportunity in the future
That's exactly what we also looked at in taking all of this public input, the 6.25 acres, what can we do with that to make it something that a more diverse community can use, recognizing that we may not serve everybody, but we do have Sabine in the future to consider what could happen there. Knock on wood someday, just like the bridge.
Okay. So Elm Grove Park, when we first met with you, we kind of had two very simplistic concepts that looked at the park. And I think there was a lot of feedback on both of these, and really what happened here is we kind of developed a refined single concept that kind of combines the best parts of each one, right? And then also included some additional things that we heard. I think we were really kind of tasked with creating more of a nature-based play area, making sure we had some play elements. There was an ask for a larger lawn area. I think we still wanted to be mindful of incorporating shade into the space, as well as kind of considering connectivity both to neighborhoods and across to Narberth Park. So I'll quick kind of start at the tunnel here. So again, you know, we approached both of these concepts, Narberth Park and Elm Grove, from the point of view that the sidewalk through the tunnel for now is what it is, right? I think in the future, there's possibilities to explore the widening of that sidewalk. But again, at A, we're looking at kind of creating that node as you approach the narrowing of the sidewalk, where you can kind of pause and wait to cross under the tunnel. And then we widen out into a wider sidewalk coming out there. And then to kind of define the park, we have another node. And what we've done, I think everyone kind of liked this idea in terms of creating separation from the road, is really developed a nice wide 10-foot path with a 5-foot wide verge that would have fencing, really develop some street trees along there, and kind of bring the walkway sidewalk into the park, right? And then also kind of setting up that wider path that might be the future nod to an extension further south, connecting into Lower Morelands Park. And forgive me, I'm blanking on the name. Short Ridge. Thank you. Okay. So that's like our main spine of the walkway. And then that, I think we had great feedback that maybe the bridge should align more with the northern sidewalk of Elmwood, and that might allow you to kind of get right into the park as you're coming off the bridge. It's still really tight in there, so we kind of have a little node, but you have that secondary path that comes into the park, or you're on the main sidewalk going up along the road. We are looking at the end of Elmwood, and again, once we have actual survey, I think would be helpful, but really kind of keeping in mind we have walkways coming out from both houses, but trying to pull back the road a little bit to create more of a riparian buffer at the end of the road there, and then providing one ADA parking spot there. And that's kind of a need of DCNR. They're going to want to see that you have ADA parking so that it is accessible into the park for all abilities. Again, the improved pedestrian bridge. And then we looked at kind of a walkway through the site. This is a completely ADA walkway, so graded under 5%. Because we are dealing with slopes over 3%, we can't really do a stone dust walkway, which might be preferable as an ADA surface. Grass is not considered an ADA surface. So we are kind of looking at the idea that this would be some sort of paved surface. It could be a porous, kind of a newer surface, but then we also start to get into that floodplain. Typically, you don't want to do porous surfaces in floodplains. So, at the end of the day, as much as sometimes we hate to say it, an asphalt pathway might be the best solution in this situation in terms of all the components. And sometimes it's the most environmental solution because it doesn't create silt that runs off into your waterways. But that, again, is a minor detail that I'm kind of harping on a little bit, but just to kind of think about what that pathway would be. So we do kind of switch back as we come down the grade here. We would have more of a slope, and that would pass through a meadow area. And then we open up into a nice large lawn at F. We have an existing shade tree there that would give ample shade. And we kind of see this as an open picnic area. You could have a few picnic tables in there if you wanted more formal seating. Probably around the tree area so you have shade. But then kind of cutting into that lawn area would be a mulched play surface area And then we started to look at some kind of nature-based plays, so things like logs for balancing on, a teepee that's, constructed out of natural logs, stepping stones. And then we did also, I think at the last meeting, we talked about the idea of bouldering. There are manufactured boulders that look very natural, that again would have a designed fall surface around it. So that's kind of the space you would need for something like that. So that kind of becomes your play component. And then that leads into I, which is our expanded floodplain. So really what we're looking at here, we have an existing stone wall on this side, right? We're taking out our wall on this side. And in reality, we're showing the alignment of the stream as it is today. As you start to cut into this hillside and really kind of increase volume capacity, that stream might start to meander through here because there's going to be a base flow that will be pretty low, right? And then you'll have where your storm flows kind of come out of those banks. So with that said, the stream might not be right up against your neighbor's wall anymore. It might want to come out, or it might be that the main channel stays against the wall, but during an overflow event, you have a spin-off channel that kind of comes into a wetland. But the idea is this would be kind of a wetland floodplain area with like a little boardwalk that goes through and allows you to kind of observe some of that nature. And then that G would be kind of our shade structure that also serves as kind of an overlook flat platform going out over that wetland area.
Would this accommodate something that I think we were either looking at in our Birth Park or Elm Grove, almost like an educational area?
Yeah, so the pavilion would definitely accommodate. I think you could have built-in benches, you could have signage along the boardwalk. It could be very understated. I don't know if anyone's been to Longwood Gardens Meadow.
Yes,
but they have
love
really
that.
cute, very subtle signage along it that's very artfully done. So I think, when we talk about educational signage, people often think of really big plaques. I think sometimes that smaller little signage is more meaningful.
But also being able to have people come in and talk about wetlands, talk about garden, how to develop a natural garden, things like
Definitely,
that.
and I think there could even, to that, again, we talked about kind of the themed garden walk over there. Maybe this becomes more of your themed garden walk where you really talk about pollinator habitat and bird habitat and the importance of these small spaces for, we talked about this with Jesse. So we have an ecologist who has been to both sites and kind of given initial recommendations. And when you look at bird habitat, this is a very small space. You're not going to have breeding grassland birds in this space, but it does serve very important migratory habitat in terms of having a place to stop over. You have water, you have potential for open grassland, so it could really serve as a really key, because that's one of the things we looked at is should this just all be reforested? But her recommendation is like, no, it would be more meaningful to have that open meadow habitat because, and if not everyone might be aware of this, but songbirds are the most birds at risk currently for decline. So since the 70s, they've been in rapid decline, and that study came out about 5 years ago. It's pretty alarming when you read the study.
Is there room in that as well, talking about signage and older adults? Like to have signage about different types of poses and flex, like is there a way,
or something
like
that.
things like that. So as people are walking, it also gives them an opportunity.
You could, and I think with something like that, so one of the things we're recommending that, it's not just mulch for the play surface, but you can use engineered wood fiber, which is often called 5R because that would be considered accessible. So you could have little notches off to the side of the pathway where maybe you have that accessible surface and a small kind of exercise station if that was something you wanted to include, yes. Or not even an exercise station, but I know you can.
Can I ask a question, or you guys?
First, I want to get from the committee any thoughts, ideas that you have about this. I know that this was at least Friday night, and looking through the surveys, people love this idea. So I don't know whether you've heard differently.
I heard a lot of excitement about all of the ideas over here, especially the picnic area and the outdoor educational classroom area. I heard, I talked to middle school students and high school students, and they're very excited about that. also the nature play, elements. They just kind of talked about they need a place where they can just be around nature at Narberth, and it's a little bit hard to find in Narberth, so they're very excited about it.
I think the educational part too, Jean, just to your point, I mean, getting that, you know, transferring it from the lawn and the great removal that Jeff's crews have done of the invasives, but transferring from a lawn to a meadow is education in itself, because that's gonna take a while. So it's kind of, you have the front row seat to that whole thing, which is great.
And the wetland too, yeah.
Sarah, just wanted to add, I think Elm Grove is the size that you can really demonstrate your ecological capabilities as a borough. It's discreet, you can start there, you can demonstrate what you can do without having to daylight. And if you're successful, Narberth Park,
across the street.
as well as falling down as well. So
Yes.
the idea of transferability of a demonstration project here has potential for other places along the creek. Before you even start to try to daylight a section, which is, as Anita said, the hardest part. But this really gives you a chance to do the ecological work for the borough that you can't as easily do in Narberth.
So that transitions right into the question I had, which is bringing back more native species, increasing the width of the creek, and all those other amazing things that you have on that concept. Would that give us more opportunity for grants and funding than asking for money for, say, playground equipment? Like across, I'm saying, if this has more funding opportunities, and is that?
I can answer it in general, Dennis.
Because it has environmental impact?
The funding opportunities right now are varied, and there's some that would just be for ecological restoration, and some would be for community and economic development, which may overlap with the recreation grants. Some of them match each other. I don't think it's either or situation, as long as you have the seed money either in the borough or a combination of two grants matching each other. So theoretically, if the borough had capacity administratively, let's say, in 1 year, you might go for 2 grants here for ecological restoration, and then another 2 for Elmwood Park, for improvements to the recreation facilities.
Bill, remind me, are we in Schuylkill or Delaware?
This is the Delaware.
Yeah,
Delaware.
so just to kind of put, we just got, NIFWIF, so National Wildlife and
Fish and Wildlife.
Fish and Wildlife. We just were successful in getting a grant for a much larger project to do a lot of restoration work. But I will tell you, they were just as excited about the restoration work as they were about the recreational aspects of it. Because for them, it's not, the only mission isn't just to restore habitat, but to get people out there and understanding the importance of the habitat, right? So for them, the recreation goes hand in hand with the restoration.
Thanks.
We're going to turn to you.
Thank you. Okay, how large is this area?
1.25.
1.25 acres.
Okay. It's not real big. Secondly, Shortridge, which is across the street, basically, has a lot of these nature things that you're talking about. They have, been planting native stuff. An ornithologist is there all the time. A lot of songbirds, that's where I go if I want to listen to songbirds. So it seems like you don't necessarily have to do that in order, if do you really want a dividing line between, well, that's Lower Merion's Nature Park, and so this is Narberth's Nature Park. I mean, maybe there ought to be more work together on that. And my last question is, where do the dogs go?
Wherever they go.
Can you remind me of the policy? Are you allow dogs in the parks?
No.
Yeah.
My experience is they go wherever they feel.
But they're not legal, there's no place in Narberth where a dog can do all sorts of.
Yeah.
Which is where I usually take
My dog. Where? Shortridge. It's not legal.
Mill
Off
Creek.
leash is not legal.
Mill
It's
Creek
Lower
is where I
Merion,
take
it's
it. Mill
not
Creek is
Narberth.
legal.
And
Yeah, that's Lower
Rolling
Merion
Hill in
also.
Gladwin, which is about 7 minutes
Yeah,
from
that's
here.
that's Lower Merion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
I was thinking Narberth.
when-
Narberth has Zippo.
Yeah, so to develop a dog park, you need at a minimum 2 acres.
Okay.
Preferably 3 acres. Because what happens, in my neighborhood, we have a small dog park, it's undersized, it's probably 1.5 acres, and half of it is dirt. Because you need that acreage to allow for areas to rest. So you would have 2 gate entrances so that the focus of the entrance isn't always at one point. So you can swap it depending on the season and allow areas to rest. So obviously, this isn't large enough, right? We're under 1.5 acres. Looking at Narberth, there's not 2 acres that we can give up in Narberth Park. So I think that's really what it comes down to.
So you rely on Lower Merion to provide it? Not close.
Yeah.
And,
Sure.
yeah, so it's West Mill Creek, drive to West Mill Creek.
Sure.
Is it, this is just an ignorance question. Is it illegal to take your dog even if they're on leash?
It might-
No, just not off leash.
Just not.
Okay, so you're allowed to have your dog on leash in parks?
Yes.
Okay.
They just can't
Pick up
run,
after
they
them.
can't run or play.
Yeah.
I don't
Some
think it-
communities you can't, my community, you can't even have your dog in a park on leash.
Yes.
That is the case for Narberth Park.
Yes,
But there's no policy for Elmwood Grove yet.
Okay.
I'm sure I'm sure the borough wouldn't be against allowing people to have dogs on a leash in that nature area.
Yeah, she's referring to a place where they can be off leash.
Well, they can
100%
run
off
and
leash.
play.
100% off leash. The only place I know of is Narberth
And
Park,
that's,
and that's private.
and we are in a community that obviously does not have the green space that is recommended by, that is recommended for its population, but we can't make more green space.
Right.
We are so fortunate that from the work that volunteers and the Borough Council did to get that, 1.2 acres. That could have been 4 townhomes,
I remember.
which would have been an ecological nightmare for future planning. Anyway, I digress, sorry.
So thank you for those thoughts.
Do you mind if we just zoom in on the pedestrian bridge?
Can you zoom in the PowerPoint?
Oh, no.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have a blow up of that.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you guys had incorporated the feedback of the direct connection from Elmwood Road to the entrance of the park instead of.
Yeah, so we looked at that as much as we could, so we shifted, so we can't put the bridge right up at the top because of construction access, because you would have to get a construction easement from the neighborhood. So we did set it back a little bit, so we went 10 feet back from that right-of-way line, just to make room for access. So, but we did move it to the north as far as we could. Because we're setting that verge, the sidewalk's already moving back into the park, so everything gets a little crammed down there, but we did try to look at that recommendation. So yes, the bridge is currently here, we are moving it up this way so that you can kind of be in the park when you come across the bridge.
Will the bridge be part of I didn't know that the bridge would be part of this whole concept.
Yeah, I think it's,
Oh, good.
I think it's part of this concept. I mean, it does
on Elmwood,
require,
I think that's wonderful.
yeah, so, with the whole relaxing of the streams and everything,
It's not meant to be.
the bridge. With the relaxing of the stream and everything, currently the condition there is you have Gabion walls
Okay, you may
that
zoom in
are
on that,
forming the
so-
abutments for the bridge.
I'm not a
Those
PowerPoint
Gabion walls
expert,
have
but
hit their lifespan.
Alan, you want to co-pilot?
Borough engineer knows
Right.
that they need to be replaced, so that would be,
Really
it would be all
We're
one
building a
project.
bridge to the sky.
In the northern, and well, we'll figure it out. In the northern end, I noticed that it was similarly, it didn't come in direct, is that just because of ADA accessibility and grade?
It didn't go straight across? Are you talking about,
It's like
yes,
you would
yeah, that
travel
was
on
trying to get
grade.
a pathway under 5%, yes.
Gotcha.
So you do have some grade coming down there. So, one of the things that we could look at, and don't worry about zooming in, but if you just want to go back to the concept.
Get back to where we were.
I hardly ever use PowerPoint, so I'm not an expert. How do I?
No worries, I don't even think I could have zoomed in, to be honest, Alan.
Alright.
Maybe what happens is maybe this becomes a mown path and that ADA path either comes right out to here. And then this is just a mown path going up, right? So there's no reason why this whole path has to be ADA. I think there's other options that we could look at, kind of simplifying things and just allowing this to be a more natural mown path that maybe gets steeper and grade at times. Yeah. So we have one more oh, sorry.
No.
I just had one quick question, which is the walkway, what is it called? Deck, not deck,
Boardwalk.
Boardwalk, thank you. Is there a version of that is just a path rather than elevated, or how, like, is there a particular reason why it was the boardwalk versus kind of like general pathway?
So because this is all gonna be wetland. So the idea is you need it to be able to sustain flood flows going across it. So that's the thought in having the boardwalk. So to get people out to experience that space, then you kind of need it to be a boardwalk. Again, this is just a concept of a boardwalk. Maybe it pulls back in scale when you actually survey the site and you determine what that floodplain restoration is actually going to look like. Maybe that pulls back in scale and it doesn't need to be as big as it is. Boardwalk is not a small cost.
And then all the skee ball and other games on the boardwalk.
Right.
Get them in there.
Shuffleboard, we can go down the boardwalk.
Miniature golf.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on Elm Grove? We do have one more to look at.
Oh, yes, let's go.
Okay. So, Town Square. Again, as a starting point, we have our schematic designs from 2020. So really what we're focused on in honoring this design is that, the ramps and the stairs are a solution that address the multimodal aspect of the plaza. We're really focused on how do we develop recreational amenities within this space. So some of the things, we had a great focus group stakeholder meeting on this. One of the things they wanted to look at was the idea of a permanent stage, but not have it feel like a stage per se, like maybe it fits in. But that way you have dedicated electric, it kind of just functions as a space within the plaza instead of just looking at a portable stage that you have to store somewhere and then you have to figure out electric, all that. They also wanted to look at covered bike parking, since this is a multimodal hub, having that sheltered bike parking was important. And then also, I think this really laid out a space, but how do we green this even further? I think the other big comment, we talked a lot about the water feature, and one, do we need a water feature? And we talked about the implications of maintenance.
Yes, we do.
No, I'm
kidding. I swear I'm only kidding.
So, one, there's the maintenance aspects. We talked about the idea, could you have a ground fountain? Then you get into the whole having to run it like it's a swimming pool. You can't just have at grade, so then you're looking at a whole filtration, monitoring, reporting. So we kind of agreed that, the fountain's not really necessary. We also talked about maybe there's a way to interpret stormwater creatively. So we talked about needing shade here. We're going to show a volume of shade. It is by no means a design of shade. But maybe that shade canopy turns into some sort of water rain feature when it rains that gets interpreted in the process. So we talked a lot about fun stuff. But so this is just a quick stab at starting to introduce some of those things we talked about. So again, we're looking at a shade area that works both for the platform, but then also becomes shade for a stage area that kind of backs up to our ramps. Coming off of that stage area is kind of very long tiers of lawn with the idea that that can just be an informal seating area when no one's up here. Maybe you have tables up here when there's not a performance, so this becomes a secondary sitting area and you're kind of looking out over the plaza. We did include a little ramp so that you have ADA access up to the stage for performers. And then also you kind of get this little space in here. You need to look at this a little bit better because I did put a bike rack right in access to the ramp, but maybe that becomes a place where you have that covered bike storage as well. maybe we add additional coverage here. That could also have solar panels on it, things like that. So that's where we kind of started to look at the introduction of how we get a permanent stage into the space, but still really maintain a large open area. I think we could still probably push the limits of how much green we kind of get in here. I think there's a lot of plaza in here. From talking with the fire department, so we are showing the reverse direction of Haverford here as well. You know, we do have that challenge, so if we're reversing it now, the fire truck's kind of coming in this way to get behind the building, so we need that rear access to the building for fire. That's a little bit better than them having to come the other way and swing the turn. But also maybe we look at how we treat this, because again, this is all meant to be curbless, right? So we're defining vehicular pathways by change in pavement and planting, but they said in a true emergency, they would probably just cut right across the plaza if they had the option. So kind of looking at that as how we kind of refine this a little bit so that we allow for that movement to happen. The other advantage of kind of reversing Haverford is it allows people to come in this way and then come out at the improved entrance with 230 kind of right at the light. So I think this concept would work with that as well in terms of a traffic flow of reversing the traffic. So this is, again, just a really quick study in how we start to meet some of those concepts. We want to refine it a little bit more as we move forward, but we just didn't want to not kind of give you an update of where we're on this.
Sarah, could you just do a quick thing? You talked about the loss of parking.
That was, I was about to ask
Yeah. So,
Great minds.
there are 15 spaces in the current parking lot. We are showing, this parking stays the same, right? We gain a space here and we lose a space here. So we have the same amount of parking on the north side of Haverford. Here is where we kind of showed that truck drop off, which might not be needed anymore because you do have clear truck movement, but actually the farmer's market, a lot of people like the fact that we had that truck drop off there. So you do lose 3 spaces with that truck drop off. So in all, we're losing 18 spaces.
So with the one issue that kept coming up last Friday with this concept, obviously the parking, particularly for drop off and pickup around the train. So are we envisioning that the parking that's there is going to be like 10-minute, like that quick parking for pickup and drop off?
We had talked about that during the stakeholders meeting, and we got kind of differing opinions on that. I would think, because they were very concerned about the business owners on the north side having this parking limited to that period of time. But at the same time, you're talking about 1, 2, 7 spaces. So if they were 10-minute parking spaces, it's not like it does open up that opportunity for the drop off.
And this diagram here shows a separate bike lane. But if you shared the road, which is still an option, because we haven't engineered it yet, then those parking spaces on the south side are not lost.
Right.
So there's a lot of trade-offs that can happen.
Yeah. Thank you.
And would that be a two-way, or it would still be a single way, but would the traffic flow still be changing direction?
The traffic flow
With the
for
other
the
option.
Greenway, what precipitated the change in direction on Windsor and Haverford for us was the county idea of where they want to enter and exit the borough with the Greenway. And the idea that you're going to have to run a contraflow lane against traffic in the current direction of Haverford, right? But if you start to think about how you might have one-way pairs with Wynwood going west and Narberth and Haverford going east, then all of a sudden you can share the road easier, and you separate the Greenway traffic through the borough by 1 block in each direction. They can cycle through Forest, they can cycle through Essex, they can cycle through Conway to get around to the other direction. There's a lot of advantages that have to be proven by engineering, but right now we're seeing a lot of green lights in wanting that, suggesting to have that study done.
Thanks for clarifying.
I have a couple of questions. So the traffic study for reversing the direction and also what's going on with Narberth Parks, do you guys have a general idea of cost and what it might cost to also implement the changes?
All our costs are gonna be developed once we hear what you wanna do. We wanna get conceptual buy-in from the committee. And before, because we could be costing everything. It's gonna take a little work to get an estimate for a traffic study, but we can give it to you.
And another thing that I was hearing as we were at the First Friday event from people was some concern about the disruption that might occur from construction of the Station Square. Can that be done in a way that doesn't disrupt that space and still can be used?
So, you're looking at something, this design doesn't just say turn the parking lot into a square. It says address the whole frontage from the north facades to the train station and create a cohesive design, right? So in some ways that can be done through phasing. In some ways it's really difficult because there's a lot of grading that has to happen to kind of create that cohesive design. So yes, you can provide access to the train station and all the businesses during construction, but no, you're not going to create a community event during construction, right? So I know that's not the perfect answer, but it's a real, yes, the train station will function, the businesses will function, but you're not going to have a usable space.
And let's say you wanted to do a table, a raised part of Haverford in that block. That might be a discrete project. Dave Brower was very strong about making sure that the entire concept, where the aesthetic of the square goes right across Haverford to the northern sidewalk. I think it's a really strong concept from the very beginning in 22. And depending on the traffic study, if it proves out, there's going to be other benefits too. Like today, I was waiting behind somebody who was loading a passenger, in the evening, right? They had to go out on the road to get in the passenger side. If you change the direction and Haverford, all of a sudden your loading and unloading is on the station side, on the north side of the station, which is not a small thing. It's for safety.
So with the elevated road, wouldn't that give us the ability to put removable ballards for public safety so that during a public event, we have something solid
Or fire
that would stop
company
a
or
vehicle
anything, could unlock the
versus
balance.
sawhorses won't stop a vehicle. In worst case scenario, right? So that would be great public safety feature.
So all of your traffic control elements like curbs or bollards or tables, all those things have to be decided in final design, but this design, which has the vehicular access through the space, allows for any of those things. It doesn't preclude any of them. Those are detailed design features, which we haven't precluded by this design.
Including the trucks for the farmer's market.
Right.
They can drive right up on the plaza.
As long as the subbase is
Which is what they would do in Strasbourg.
It's what they want to do, right?
Yeah, it's what they want to do, and it's the practical thing.
Yeah.
So to require them to park half a block away makes no sense whatsoever.
So it's 9:08, and I know we promised you we'd be done at 9 and we lied. We gave you one answer about the daylighting, and I think we've all agreed that's not going to happen, at least in Narberth Park. The second big decision was the skate park and what to do about that. And so from what I've heard, I think we want to go forward with the concept you showed us with the understanding that you may be looking at the basketball field or the basketball courts to see if there's ways of multi-purposing those so that when they're not being used, they can be used for pickleball, tennis, whatever.
Yeah, we can look at that. And I think I would even recommend that we still show both refined concepts to the
Yeah,
public if you guys
I would
are,
too.
because I think when you see, I don't know, personally, you see the open space and it's meaningful to some people to have that open space and not have all the courts. So I think it's valuable to get that feedback as we move forward from the public.
So that, to clarify, the refinements you're looking for Narberth Park for October 9th is the inclusion of a hard surface, a half court that can do a pickleball, generally north and west of the Rushaima Skate Park.
Yeah, and then looking at pickleball on the existing basketball courts.
Yeah.
Can I ask if, and this there may not be any interest in this, but can I ask if, is it possible to show what it would mean in terms of a refinement that reclaims some of the additional area back into the skate park?
I think if you guys wanted to look at not having the parking on the road, the basketball courts can shift down. So if we lose that parking, we would be losing a total of 47 spaces.
That's a lot of parking.
Where does that, yeah, so I guess where does that all come from?
We are losing 12 spaces in the actual parking lot by greening up the parking lot. And then we are losing the remainder of the spaces from the dedicated bike lane. If we get away from the dedicated bike lane, which I think Bill brought up a really good point, the whole point of the bike lane was because it was a contra-flow lane. But if we're going to the switched one-way, we can do sharrows, which the level of comfort on these roads I think are appropriate for sharrows, especially with some of the traffic calming stuff we're showing. Then we pick back up that on-street parking. So in reality, you would only be losing about 12 spaces.
And, I was just gonna ask what would it look like if the parking lot largely remained its configuration without the greening of the lot?
I feel like when you arrive at the parking lot, it doesn't tell you you're in a park. So I think
it is
would
a
be,
parking lot.
I know, but there's a lot to be said for a sense of place and so we can't daylight the stream in Narberth Park, but what we can do is put trees in the parking lot. And that goes a long way, right? So I think and showing the value of wanting to be ecologically mindful in Narberth Park, I would recommend that you consider a redesign of the parking lot.
I guess like the way that I come at that is just, it makes total sense if you're designing the parking lot from scratch. But my experience with parking lots, granted, as someone that doesn't drive, thank you to my fiance, who is the driver in the household, is that there are spaces where cars live. And so while I understand that there is value to greening up parking lots, ultimately there's not human beings like using them all the time. And so if it's the trade-off between having more usable space that human beings are going to be running around and active in versus having kind of like placid areas in a parking lot, I think that's a decision.
I think the way that the parking lot actually is redesigned gives more space to the park itself, so it pulls the park into the existing parking lot.
Oh, it does?
And remember, there's thoroughfare.
Flash that back up.
It removes
For some
of the
reason I can't control anymore.
Like there's thoroughfare that is separate from the parking purpose. Public Works needs to get to their maintenance area and the garage, so that you're already having that entrance paving right off the roadway and the whole apron in front of the maintenance area, right? So you can't eliminate it all.
Right.
And so if you eliminate the front parking that Sarah's shown reconfigured, you're really minimizing parking in
I
that
think
park.
the other thing that we're
So
adding
this like large island area in here.
It's not gonna gain you more parking.
Is it because?
No, not in terms of parking, but if it shifted in, how much does it gain in terms of
That's a
the skate park?
Or could that be used
So,
for pickleball?
The other thing that we're offering in the parking lot, which is something that we would recommend, is you currently have no pedestrian access around your parking lot. So when you get out of your car, the only thing you can do is walk in the parking lot. That's a safety concern. So as a designer, we need to minimize pedestrian vehicular conflicts. So we also are showing a walkway that if you park to the east side along the neighboring properties, you have a walkway that you can come all the way around and get into the park. You're not having to walk across multiple flows of traffic.
I do think this concept at least goes towards more of what the vision of this whole purpose was, in order to provide both the ecological, the environmental, and the play areas. So from that perspective, I think this is a strong, what do we call this? It's not a detailed plan.
Yeah.
I do want to echo Michael's concern that I feel like that skate park is just like a little bit too small to the needs of a wide range of skateboard users.
So there's more activities in that skate park than you have in your current skate park.
Yeah, I think you said there's
I do
more.
want to point that out. So
The design, not to cut you
Yeah.
off, but the redesign of the parking lot isn't what's detracting from the skate park.
It's the
Or the redesign.
buffers on the basketball court that detract.
It is, and what's deceptive is a 10-foot wide sidewalk. Picture that. The area and the length you're talking about, and you start to calculate that, and I won't do that in my head as far as what acreage is. But you look at that park and you don't see the walkways, but honestly, gee, that's a ton of space.
Yeah.
And it is a vital thing, and that was definitely part of what, the direction was, and I think the passive, activities for people who do just wanna stroll, that is a park activity. And you don't see it because it doesn't look like it's, it doesn't jump out at you, but think of a 10-foot walkway, that is a large amount of space.
Can they be 5-foot
It can be
walkways?
its own linear park, that's where people are gonna ride tricycles and they're gonna.
So I think the idea with the 10-foot walkway is that we're trying to create a place where people can run, can push strollers, can, I guess, not walk your dog, but
Yeah.
you can pass people. So that's the idea with the 10-foot walkway. I think one thing that I'd recommend is, again, neither of these are the draft plan, right? There's a whole level of feedback we're gonna get, and then we're gonna develop a draft plan. Right now, we're showing 7,000 square foot skate park. If we get to the public meeting and they say it has to be 10,000, then we look at how we make it 10,000. But I don't think now is the time to redesign the size of the skate park. That happens at the next phase if we know that the community wants a skate park. This shows you a skate park that fits with everything else that we've been tasked with kind of having in the park.
I also just want to note that we are looking into adding parallel parking along Haverford Avenue. That may be temporary, it may be semi-permanent, I'm not sure, but that would.
On the southern edge?
Well, I think mostly on the north side,
I
actually.
think there is parallel parking on the north side.
Yeah, but adding more.
Okay.
So taking it further.
There was at one point talk of backing parking back, it seems like they're completely off the table with the 10-foot wide.
That's what we're showing.
Oh, it is?
Just south
But
of the
they just have it.
basketball.
And I'm wondering
That-
if we move that back down, eliminate that back parking because we have the parallel parking along Haverford Avenue. Would that create more space?
I think it's, the reality of it is it's not gonna create as much space as you want because it's not like you're gonna get a whole nother row of apparatus in the skate park. Right now you have a lane, you have apparatus above and below, and the idea is they kind of skate, they're gonna, they're gonna hit the stairs, they're gonna kind of do stuff up here, they're gonna come down, they're gonna do these banks, they're gonna hit the curb, and they're gonna interact on these two things. Just by moving this all down, you're not suddenly gonna get a third tier of things. Does that make sense?
Without going into design, that's a good, quick analysis. But we're talking like an order of magnitude. If that's between 7,000 and 8,000, and the skate people want 18 or 20, you can't get there in this park to that. So, shaving off some tree area, trying to get, maybe another couple thousand feet inside the space, it's.
But that was kind of what I was asking, was
Right.
if you shave some of this, could you get another
I
1,000?
appreciate what you're asking us to look at, but in the aggregate, can we even get close to what the threshold is for professional destination skate park?
Because really, to
Don't think so with
add
all
to
the
the
other
skate
things in
park,
this.
it wants to get longer. It doesn't want to get wider. To add more events, it needs to elongate, which,
So you can shave and shave, and you don't achieve the goal of a bigger and more functional
Well, it
skate.
gets bigger, but is it to the goal? No.
Or is it just
reach the
bigger?
goal.
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on, like, it's two different questions, right? Versus like whether you get to the goal. If the goal is 18,000 and we're saying, I get it, that's a different question to me, rather than does it become more usable if you get 1,000 additional feet?
Can we get to half of the goal? That doesn't even get to half of the goal.
No, but like, let's just put aside questions of what the goal is, because we're gonna define what the goal is. So let's not assume that the goal is 18,000 square feet or whatnot. The question in my mind is, does 1,000 square feet make it present different usability outcomes? And let's just present that as the goal for a moment and look at that.
but I guess at this point, if you look at
Because
the
1,000
size
square
of
feet is
it,
more than the footprint of my house.
I get it. And these structures aren't small. So to make this skate park, the way it's designed currently, schematically, to make it more meaningful, it wants to be longer. It does not want to be wider.
And that's why I was looking at the parking lot areas in terms of whether.
So, I mean, you could make it a little longer if you guys decide, hey, a drop off isn't really needed.
But would 1,000, and I don't know anything about skate parks, would 1,000 more additional feet add that much more benefit to the skate park versus all the other things?
That's the question I don't know the answer to, but that's why I wanted to ask whether, like, what is your marginal benefit from that?
And that's where I don't really recommend that we try to make it bigger until we get feedback from the public who says, yes, we definitely want a skate plaza, and yes, it needs to be 10,000 square feet, and we make that refinement at the draft plan phase.
I just wanted to bring up one point, because the October 9th meeting, the public meeting, I'm wondering if there's gonna be tennis court advocates, because we had some night.
Hopefully.
And I'm wondering, I feel like somebody should be prepared to talk about the history of tennis courts and why we did the pilot. And I feel like there was some discussion that, to me, the tennis courts were crumbling at one point and there was no maintenance of them. So it felt like, to me, my son is a skateboarder and he was like 16 or something like that when we did this. And it was so cool, and all these kids came, and there's more activity now than there ever has been that I've seen. But I wonder if it's gonna come up at the public meeting, if somebody's gonna be like, whatever happened to the tennis courts, and how did this all come about? But there was also no funding for the tennis courts, so I feel like somebody, but now do you know what I mean?
So I think
I feel like we're gonna have a lot more skateboard advocates than tennis court advocates, but the tennis court people might be pissed off.
Yeah. So our understanding of the tennis courts, and anyone here can correct us, is that the sub-base of the tennis courts are beyond repair. So it's not just a resurfacing of the tennis courts. Now, Narberth Athletic Association had money to repair the tennis courts, but I don't think it was a complete reconstruction.
Right.
But I think at this point we are tasked with, if you're going to have tennis, it's a complete reconstruction of the tennis courts to have a meaningful tennis experience at this point. So with that said, I will say tennis courts, and this might, I mean, when you're looking at traditional recreational facilities, so we're not thinking about skate parks necessarily, because I'm not gonna put them in traditional recreation. But per users, per square foot, tennis courts are the most expensive things you can do.
Right.
So I think, again, when you look at the regional accessibility to tennis courts, who's typically playing tennis? Can they get in a car? Can they hop on the train?
Totally.
We have regionally adequate tennis courts.
And this is like perfect skate park location.
I think it's also worth noting
I'm like pro skate park.
we have funding available to us for building a skate park, but we
This
do
is
not
also
have funding available to build a tennis court.
But you don't know what strings are
I'm just
attached to
thinking
the
it, maybe
funding.
it'll come up in the
It
public
could be
meeting.
size, so
No, the funding
there's
is.
no guarantees.
But you want a size, you want a certain size.
But the funding is calculated for the bigger size possible.
Yeah.
So
What
it's
is
a,
it calculated for, 18 or 20?
yeah, 18,
Oh my God.
yeah.
Which is great.
So, just sharing that just because it's a fact, that
So you're
it's in
saying,
the budget.
the funding is contingent on a minimum 18,000 square?
I think, just to share a quick thought, I think the 7,000 square foot one will not cut it. Like when you look at Mary Place, right, we're familiar, it's a very small skate park, very crowded. Only some skaters can use it because they are very fast. So I think. Exactly. So for the level of population here, probably the minimum would be something like Pennsauken, which is 14,000 square feet. So you can have areas. And the beauty of the skate park is actually you don't need to make it longer or wider. You can adapt the design to whatever.
Well, when you have 14,000, so
And
14,000
it doesn't need
is
to be a
twice
square,
the
it doesn't need to be a
size.
square.
Yeah, that would.
I know, but it's still twice of what you're
We
seeing up
need to
there.
not get into these details right
Yeah.
now. And the other thing is that if there's funds coming from Lower Merion will set the agreement terms. So, this is all generalities right now.
We all still have Sabine, so we could also look at a more expanded skate park in Sabine.
So just in summary then,
It's funny you said that because when I did my skate park walkthroughs, I came to the opposite.
So
That we can't do.
maximizing.
No, we definitely could,
skate
but
park
the
is
elements that I
takeaway
thought
and seeing if we
separate
can.
can successful.
no, that's not the takeaway. I think the takeaway is we are gonna present two concepts. We are not gonna change anything to the size of concept 2 for the skate park because we want to flush out the desire for the skate park at the meeting. But we will refine, make a refinement to include a hard surface that would be applicable for a half court or a pickleball court to the northwest of the skate park where the trees are. That's the only plan modification we will make between now and October 9th. That's what we're hearing, right? And as well as, indicate, of course, that the basketball courts could have an overlay for pickleball as well.
I just,
That's not the
well,
direction
I
I'm
mean,
taking.
I'm just concerned because if, I'm saying we have the funding available for the skate park, but it's for a larger skate park.
Yes.
So we do not have.
Have we had a conversation though with Lower Merion about the direction we're going at to find out whether a smaller skate park would still be funding would still be available for that, because they don't have one anywhere.
That's certainly the discussion, right? So I think that the people who shared with us, which we appreciate from Patricio and that group, was hearing what options could serve the largest amount of users from varying age groups, right? Tossing those things around. We made it very clear, and I know that they understood because they made that PowerPoint, that this is still, we're looking at a park plan. We're not looking specifically at a skate park plan. They knew that this was something that evolved after we started this process. So they were invited in because we were really, honestly, we knew we wanted to talk to skaters. And we're like, okay, who? And then we find out that Lower Merion is very interested. It all came together. So it's a wonderful thing. It's a huge challenge. There's tons more to discuss. But I think we're obviously on the same page. I hear what you're saying, Jean, but I just do not want to invest the time and the effort to make modifications to what we're showing here for a certain size, when it's fairly visible in a description, what a larger park would look like, right? We can see, it can only go in a certain amount of directions. It can take away from the parking, it can take away from the lawn space, it affects the basketball. It's just sort of that simple, so.
I guess the important thing is you have it here on the plan, so it's there, and
It
if we
is.
need to change sizing, or we can do
still
all that
have one
after
more
the fact, you
iteration.
just wanna hear from the public
Yes.
first,
So
yeah.
we're gonna refine after the next public meeting.
And the good part about this design is that you could make a hard decision in the very near future or later in the future to give up some of the parking and expand the skate park meaningfully into what's already paved, right? That's our decision, but would expand the skate park meaningfully.
I think,
And that stays an option.
yeah. And going back to the very beginning comments that Dennis had, you know, in looking at this park and looking at a skate park that maybe isn't appropriate for the regional population, but is appropriate for the park, right? In that you have the regional baseball field, you have regional basketball courts. Like, again, having so many regional destinations in one small park demands parking. So I think as much as we all think, okay, people in Narberth walk to the park, there's a lot of people that drive to this park for certain things. So you do have to keep that in mind, that you can't just make a larger skate park and get rid of all parking, right? You have neighbors that depend on on-street parking in this area. We heard that a lot through the key person interviews. So, you know, there's a lot of factors that play into what is an appropriate size skate park for this park.
Right, and I just want to be clear, I wasn't talking about getting rid of all parking, just in terms of looking at some of the areas in the parking lot that aren't actually parking.
Right. I'm just talking about doubling a skate park, because again, you
Right, and that's, and I know that that's what you're talking about, but I had a different question than that.
Fair enough. Okay.
All right, it's 9:30. I think we're gonna call it. And I guess we'll see everybody and more on October 9th at 7 p.m.
Very good.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, and don't do this for
Recording stopped.
You are a PowerPoint guru.